I think I messed up like before we started recording.
I'm already mad.
Yeah, I know. All right, what's going on, y'all? It is time for the Dynasty mailbag, and we delayed our recording one evening because of the news that hit the Twitterverse yesterday afternoon. And I'm not gonna lie, we'll get into it here in just a minute. I mean, first things first. I mean, obviously, if you enjoy the show, enjoy the banter, enjoy the analysis, come follow the YouTube channel. Tons of other stuff that's going on this channel. Actually, if you haven't checked it out already, go and check out the new show with our boys Shane and Scott Connor. That's doing. I mean, just they're the two of them. Their personalities are bad enough as it is, but like being able to get like combine the both of them like onto a single show. So I mean, if you get a chance, go and check that out. Addison's always doing like awesome stuff, and also like Ryan McDowell. I mean, one of the OGs like in the Dynasty community, but. Definitely get a chance to come and check out the content that we've got here on the YouTube channel whenever you have a chance. Also, for our purposes here, if you have a mailbag question for us, I mean, definitely come drop us a note here at the link that you see below us. We'll be doing this thing every Wednesday, Thursday night, depending on scheduling and whatnot. But come find us. Come holler at us on Twitter. You see our Twitter handles like down below, and always. I mean, drop us a comment on the YouTube videos themselves so we can come and interact with y'all that way if you happen to have questions about what we've got going on. And speaking of the actual mailbag questions, we did get one. Before we get into the topic of tonight, we wanted to get this one out of the way before we get upset.
Yep.
So this one comes from Kenny. Just a quick one right here. So he's got his rookie draft coming up and he's looking at a QB, and we're going to talk about what are the differences or if there's anything to be gained by going in either direction between drafting Joe Burrow or Tua Tagovailoa. And I'm assuming he must have either multiple picks or maybe he can move down or something like that. So either of the two, he must have the 101, I'm assuming. If either
or it's one QB and he's
or it's one QB, and he can move about and draft either of them. But Adam, if you're approaching this and had the choice before you, how would you go about looking at these two wonderful QB prospects?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, because let's say if it is one QB, I'm even more inclined because you don't have to worry too much about quarterback value. You don't have to worry about Burrow's value in a season that he gets to start. So in that situation, with being one QB, I'd be much more inclined to take Tua. It gets a little more dicey in Superflex with value, of course, because you get to see Burrow this year. You probably don't get to see much of Tua this year if you do get to see him at all, and that just affects value a lot. So basically, I'm in Superflex still going with Burrow. In one QB, I think I'd probably go Tua. We liked Tua a lot more going into the year. Got hurt, broke his hip, actually. It was terrible. And then Burrow happened to have one of the best seasons, actually the best season of any quarterback in NCAA history, most touchdowns ever. So it's really hard because Burrow went from is he going to be drafted? Is he going to be one of those undrafted guys, late round guys? I don't know. Wow. First player overall in the entire NFL.
Right.
So look, we're going to talk about reactions in Dynasty all night, but the reaction to Joe Burrow having the best season ever, that's enough value to where you just have to take him and then flip him for Tua. Honestly, if Tua sits out the first year, and then around the name, the glow around the name just kind of the shimmer goes away. You don't mind taking Burrow if he's your QB3 or something like that, and sending him over for Tua. And especially if you do that mid-season, well, you might see Tua in 2 weeks after that. And then, I mean, we talk about the offenses too. I'll get into that real quick. That is a really good offense for Burrow. I mean, he's got Tyler Boyd, AJ Green, and then he's just going to be cycling T. Higgins, Ross, and Auden Tate showed out a little bit.
Right.
So not to mention Mixon's apparently not holding out. So that's going to be helpful as well. That's a great offense. But if Devontae Parker is still worth anything after having a decent last year, Preston Williams came on super hot before the ACL injury, and now with the camp getting shortened and cut out and less contact, probably should be healthy for the season. Mike Gesicki, and then now at least they brought in some help in the backfield with Matt Breida. I love Matt Breida. I mean, Jordan Howard wasn't going to catch anything. I mean, it's help. Next year, maybe they do look to draft a running back, because honestly, they did a really good job the past 2 years not drafting running back when people swore that they were going to take Swift or something like that. So, yeah. And I don't believe that that's necessarily a huge utmost importance for a rookie quarterback anyways, but he's got receiving weapons there. He's got a team that seems to have its head on straight for the first time in a decade. I don't think that Tua is in much worse of a situation than Burrow, and I don't think you miss on either of them. Take Burrow and maybe try to flip him for Tua and a little extra sometime later.
Yeah, I think that's the right approach to it, because I mean, if you need like some help now, so if you're in a super flex league or something like that, and you're looking for a solid QB2 option or something along those lines, I can understand like wanting to move for Burrow, because he's got the guaranteed start in week 1. Right. And then with Tua, sure, like I know that the news just came out either yesterday or the day before that he had passed his physical, so he should be completely cleared. Should be good to go. So it's really just comes down to how Flores and the rest of the team like want to approach the 2020 season. Like, do they just let it rip, see how he adjusts to the pro game, and then if he starts to falter and they want to protect their first round draft pick, and they can just put Ryan Fitzpatrick in, or they just let Ryan Fitzpatrick start, see if he fizzles out, and then throw Tua in. However they want to do it. But I'm assuming at some point Tua is going to be playing at some point in the 2020 season. It's just a question of when. So now if it actually is Joe Burrow that is going to be playing Joe Burrow is going to be starting week 1, then that's an easier sell for me in terms of who I'd want to draft right out the gate. But I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, both their situations are situations that we would want to invest in when it comes to Dynasty. But just to do a quick highlight to look at a couple of the writers here within DLF, we had a couple of rookie scouts, rookie profiles that went on like earlier this season, so around the February timeframe. So from our dearly departed Ray GQ, he actually put together one of the profiles for Tua, and he kind of walked through some of his stats. And like as Adam mentioned earlier, I mean, you can see his stats like actually fell off in 2019, mostly due to the hip injury. Right. I mean, really, when it comes down to athleticism, when it comes to football IQ, mental processing on the field, like in real time, I mean, there were a few prospects that were capable of doing, at least in the 2020 class, capable of doing it better than Tua. So at least from a talent perspective, sure, I think that I would probably give the edge to Tua. But then, of course, I mean, looking at Joe Burrow, in this piece actually written by our DOM brother, Dwight Peebles, I mean, LSU, you couldn't have scripted a better season for that team or for that franchise. I mean, again, Joe Burrow's ability to create out of structure, through the air, on the ground, actually, he was, really everybody's looking at his passing stats, but really the dude could scoot like if he needed to. Mm-hmm. So I think really my only concern when it comes to Joe Burrow, and I think Dwight made the proper point, and probably because both of us like live around the Ohio-ish area, right. Is like what Cincinnati, like how they choose to build around Joe Burrow. Now we've seen in the past, they've brought, like how they've tried to build their team. They've kind of let some of their assets kind of fizzle out like within the franchise without making too many, I guess, useful free agency acquisitions or even draft acquisitions that wind up helping out the team. We've seen how long AJ Green has actually had to like sit out and be essentially like the wide receiver that they've had to rely on week in and week out as they traded away Marvin Jones, traded away Mohamed Sanu, and moved, Rex Burkhead. There's so many pieces that have come like through in and out of that offense that, it's just really been the mainstays that have really been a part of the highlight reels. So I'm hoping that they're trying to turn over a new leaf. With the acquisition of Burrow and T, and with Auden Tate kind of showing out, they actually have a pretty strong offensive core like around Burrow, and they can keep things and they can refresh things as AJ Green, he's getting older, and like whenever he decides to hang him up, that they continue to build around him, so that they can actually have some like success that sustains like through this season and farther on. With Tua, it already looks like they're building their team in the proper way. Looking at where they've spent their money at, how little they spent at running back, bringing in both Jordan Howard and Matt Breida. I do think they are building a football team essentially the same way that New England's kind of built their team. I mean, they focused a lot on defense, bringing in a lot of the Patriots castaways, and then they've been spending along the offensive line as they needed to, spending along the defensive front as they need to, and then kind of just dropping in like the right offensive starters as they come along. So I think they're building their team the right way. I'm just hoping Cincinnati can follow the same model. So like maybe in 2 or 3 years, we might say that Tua has the better situation, but that really comes down to how their respective franchises really try and pilot their team from like a free agency or just from a team building perspective. But if we're just looking at those two prospects side by side, yeah, to me, really, you can't go too far off. I mean, they were high picks in the first round for a reason, and so you can't. I don't think you can't go too far off like by picking either. If like gun to my head, I'd probably take Joe Burrow, but that's because I'm attached to Cincinnati and I'm excited about the team. But I'm not going to try and put that bias on you, so you can go either way. All right, time to get upset. Okay, so I mean, the hot topic right now. It doesn't even matter. I mean, it doesn't matter what the format we're talking about. Dynasty, best ball, redraft. It doesn't matter. I mean, the pandemic has affected the entire league. And now with these voluntary opt-outs available for players, we finally got hit with the first, really big name that's decided to sit this year out in order to be with their family, like while we try and figure out what we're going to do with this virus that's spreading across our nation. And of course, for me personally, that's one hurt because I was really hopeful that Damien Williams would come back and show everybody what he's capable of doing, but he has opted to be with his family. Will not fault him for that, and that's a wonderful decision on his part. But it kind of leaves a hole where we expected an RB2 of his talent to be at, and that allows for the Clyde Edwards-Helaire truthers to take their victory laps, as we've seen across the timeline for the last 24 hours or so. But a couple of things arise out of this. One question being, how do you approach Dynasty relevant starters opting out? And we'll discuss that here in just a minute. And then the other thing is, how do you approach CEH's value moving forward? I know a lot of folks have been posting about their trades that they've been, we don't know 100% if they're true or not, but we can discuss like how to approach moving a player, if you so choose, like CEH, or even the merits to moving a player like CEH, given the situation that they're in. And then, of course, we'll talk about what that means for other possible relevant fantasy starters, like if they do decide to opt out, at least our process behind it. So those are the two big topics that we'll be talking about for the rest of this evening. So let's focus, Adam, first off, let's focus on CEH specifically. So what are we doing with Clyde Edwards-Helaire? I'll pull up this. So we've got this tweet that we pulled up. I know it's been making the rounds of a guy posting, these 3 trades that he saw that people have been making. Again, I'm skeptical at best as to if these trades actually happened. If they happened, okay, fine. Hats off to you for making, for making these trades. But even if they aren't, are these trades, I guess, worthy of our attention at this point? Would this be what you're doing in order to capitalize on this news? Or are you just standing firm in the fact that you drafted CEH at the 101, 102, somewhere in there, and you're just holding firm with your draft acquisition?
Okay.
Let's do it, man.
All right. I'll start by saying I don't hate CH. I'm sorry that it's going to have to sound like that. He is the profile picture for the Dynasty Owners Manual podcast Twitter handle. So
he is, isn't he?
You could go check that just in case you think that I hate him. But my goodness, if we have not quadruple counted CEH Dynasty value. And for those who don't know what double counting is and triple counting and now quadruple counting, it's when, okay, I like CEH because he can catch footballs. Okay, now he's my 102. Oh, I like CEH because he's on the Chiefs. Okay, now he's my 101. Oh, I like CEH because he's the only running back on the Chiefs. Well, now he's the 100.
He's the negative one.
That's double counting. That's triple counting. These are all things that were baked in the first time. You didn't need to bake in and bake in and bake in again. And now it's baked in all the way at the top. I'm in the DLF mock for August. I picked Michael Thomas at pick 106. 107 was CEH. Dalvin Cook went 108. Still going after that. So that's how far he's made it. The 107 in Dynasty without knowing what his snap count's going to be, because he's tied to Patrick Mahomes for 5 years. That's fantastic. Tied to Andy Reid for 5 years. That's fantastic. Damien Williams is not gone. He is opting out of the season. His contract resumes next year. He's not on the medically exempt list, which means he does not accrue any time. He does not get the $350,000 stipend. He gets a $150,000 salary advance and will be there next year under contract for the last year of his contract. They are going to be excited to have Damien Williams back. He essentially won them a Super Bowl and probably should have been the Super Bowl MVP.
I was just going to say that. Thank you.
Damien Williams in that building. And people were already going crazy for CH this year. And he's a hell of a player on a hell of a team. I get it. But Damien Williams was going to be far more involved than people were giving credit for, because we think that teams give a damn where we drafted players in our dynasty drafts. They do not. Damien Williams was still going to get close to 50% of the touches, and people were paying for CEH like he wasn't. And now you're going to be really upset because CEH is going to get 55, 60% of the touches, and you're still going to see way too much Darwin Thompson, way too much Dwayne Washington, way too much Darrell Williams. It's just what's going to happen. So my question here is, what do you gain by keeping CEH in Dynasty at this point, when you could trade for a better prospect in J.K. Dobbins and just as good of a situation with J.K. Dobbins, except J.K. Dobbins is behind Mark Ingram, but CEH wasn't considered behind Damien Williams. Oh, CEH was going to get everything. But
because that first round capital, man, first round draft capital changed everything.
Dobbins with his second round draft capital was going to have to redshirt behind Mark Ingram. I mean, we might see a situation where J.K. Dobbins handles probably not as much as CH now, but if Damien Williams played, we probably would have seen similar snap percentages between J.K. Dobbins and CH. And J.K. Dobbins was going way, way, way behind CH, even though just as good of an offense, probably more running back friendly, and way later. So why wouldn't we be taking CEH and trading for J.K. Dobbins plus right now? Because that's what you're supposed to do in Dynasty. Then sit on CEH and just say, oh, I'm going to ride him into the sunset, even though the sunset just started. The sun just rose on CEH. Yeah. You're not riding him into the sunset for 5 years, but that's what you're going to have to do if you draft him right now, because he's already the 7th overall player. The only thing that can make CEH worth the price right now is if he has like 1,500 total yards in his first year. Could happen, I guess, because he need like 13 to 1,500 yards, 50-ish receptions to be worth RB4 right now. And, you know, if he did that, then maybe he would be the 101 in Dynasty.
Sure.
Like, McCaffrey's ready to be jumped probably next year, and doesn't need to stay ahead of CEH if he doesn't have a great year this year, because frankly, that offense isn't going to be conducive to Saquon Barkley reaching his potential anyways, and he's only going to have 1 year left on his contract. So yes, there is opportunity for CEH to leapfrog 2 players, Barkley and CM, but he's already being so priced that you're in that range anyways. Really, is it worth buying him right now? You can't go buy him right now. You do not want to be one of these trades that's getting laughed at on Twitter, but you know, apparently it's not getting laughed at, because look at these 3, and a lot of people are thinking, you know, CEH, I did see confirmed, got traded straight up for Kamara, and I get that you're buying years. I don't mind that.
That makes sense.
That's the only part that makes sense to me, because if CEH doesn't click right away, and we see players all the time not click right away, that doesn't mean that they're not going to be productive. I mean, it took 4 years for Derrick Henry to click. It doesn't happen for everyone right away.
It doesn't have to. I mean, I don't know, man.
If it doesn't click right away, it's a disaster for whoever's paying for him right now.
Yeah, and just like we were talking beforehand, so let's say if you've drafted him, or let's say if you drafted him and you decide to hold on to him, not even going to try and move him at this point, and then now after this season, so let's say he meets his projections, which if you depending on like which projection sites you go to, most folks have him around 13 to 1400 like scrimmage yards in his rookie season, which is great. I mean, RB9, about like somewhere in there for where he can wind up at. Also great. And at the end of the season, you go and like you're looking around your roster. You need some more assets elsewhere. You see him as being a piece that you might want to try and sell. And then the first person that comes up, or the first other manager that comes up and tries to negotiate with you, I mean, they immediately want to knock the price down because they know that Damien's coming back.
It'll happen.
Like, who's to say that that's not going to happen? Like the second, I mean, you try and sell this first round asset that you just picked up, who just went off for 1,400 yards, but then the person immediately comes back and says, well, Damien Williams coming back, so he's really not he's not going to get what he got last year. I mean, that is completely plausible, or within the range of outcomes in terms of how we're going to be looking at his value in 2021. Because again, Damien Williams should still be a part of that offense. It's not like he got cut, and it's not like when Kansas City comes back to review his contract, they're going to wind up cutting him because he doesn't have a huge part of the cap anyway.
And he's their Super Bowl hero. I mean, we need to understand that the NFL does not work the same way that Dynasty and that fantasy football works. He was their Super Bowl hero. I mean, we've seen time and time again these Super Bowl heroes go. We're still looking at Nick Foles. Trey Burton got a huge contract.
Man,
they love him. I'm telling you, they love Damien Williams. They are going to be super happy to have him back. They can't really fault him for opting out legally because they are his employer, and you cannot fault an employee for opting out of a year of their contract. So it's not like he's going to be in the doghouse for opting out of participating in probably spreading a pandemic. Yeah. So they're going to love to have him back. And it just blows my mind that, okay, he got triple counted up to what he was like the 204 in Dynasty startups.
Yeah.
And that was because people were saying that Damien Williams was not going to be a factor. Okay, so you put him at 204 because Damien Williams wasn't going to be a factor. But then Damien Williams, who wasn't going to be a factor, decides to opt out of the season. Great decision for his family. You put CEH up to the 106.
Yeah.
But he was at the 204 already. So the best thing that I've heard through the whole 2 days is Trader Joe tweeted me, and he said CEH is probably worth what he's been going for now. I was like, you're being rational. You can't do that.
Yeah. Not right now.
That made absolutely perfect sense. It's like, yeah, he's probably worth the 204 now. Wasn't before, but now, okay, I'll give it to you. I mean, he just lost a huge competitor in the backfield.
Right.
Probably worth 204. The 106, no, I'm not doing that. And we have CEH, and we tried to field some offers, and pretty strong right out. I mean, Chubb, OBJ, Judy are some options out there, but Wade with CEH. The one I sent out that we were willing to do was Tyler Boyd, CJ Uzama, and CEH for Chubb.
It was like Chubb, DJ Moore, Ian Thomas. I thought that was it.
So it was a 3 for 3. And they didn't buy it, surprisingly. I'm very surprised, given I get why it's scary to trade him right now. I can tell you that. Yeah. I don't want to trade him right now and then find out in 2 months that you could have gotten an entire roster for him. I think that it's probably the smartest thing to do to at least try to see if somebody will give you something silly for him right now before you ever need to see if it even clicks for him on day one.
Right. I think that's the thing that I want to hit on, is that I know a lot of folks are, I guess, downing this idea that you should sell CEH like based off of this news. And I mean, to be quite honest, I disagree. I wholeheartedly disagree with that, because we should be looking at maximizing value at this point. And in the scenario that I laid out, which to me, I mean, if somebody disagrees with me on the fact that, let's say CEH balls out this season, and then you go try and sell him next season, but yet the detractors will be like, well, Damien's coming back, so he's not going to get what he got in 2020. If you disagree with that, come talk to me, and I would love to hear like a separate side of that. But using that, I mean, as my basis for making my next claim is that why should we not try and maximize on value as dynasty managers? Why should we not try and see if we can strike while the iron's hot and wind up getting a player like J.K. Dobbins, like DeAndre Swift, plus a number of other assets in order to make up for the fact that we're moving Clyde Edwards-Helaire? Because in my mind, if you were even just to remove the names and then now just say, well, I'm trading the 101 for the 104, 105 plus what would have been the 101 in years past. So say we were talking about like one of the trades that was up there was CEH for something like J.K. Dobbins and AJ Brown. Right. I would wholeheartedly love to entertain a trade along those lines, like where you're able to pick up an asset in this season that you believe can help. Plus, I mean, and along with getting what we would consider to be a second, at the very least, a second, third round like player in a startup. So I'm looking for value at this point. I'm looking for maximizing value as often as possible. So while I'm not wholeheartedly advocating for just go out and sell them, just go out and sell them, just go out and sell them, as a dynasty manager, you should at least be fielding as many offers as you possibly can to get a gauge on the current market of the player. I think that's the best process I can think of in order to approach the current news.
The situation is why we do Dynasty Owners Manual. It's why we have the mailbag show. It's why you listen to these podcasts. For this situation, you're supposed to maximize values. Now, with running back, you're typically trying to find the next CEH. You're trying to find the next CMC, the next Saquon Barkley. It just so happens that you're trying to find the next CEH before CEH has even become CEH in this situation. But okay, who could be the next CEH? I would contest that could be J.K. Dobbins. I won't say it's DeAndre Swift, even though Swift had a way better profile too, just because I don't know how to trust the Lions offense or even what we're going to see from them. But I do know what we're going to see from the Ravens, and I do know that J.K. Dobbins was a far better prospect than CEH. I mean, I liked CEH a lot. I mean, I still do. J.K. Dobbins was just far and away a better prospect, probably better than Swift now that I'm looking back at it. Close to JT. And he's sitting there with AJ Brown plus. And while you're at it, go trade for J.K. Dobbins and AJ Brown, and then send AJ Brown before you have to figure out if he's going to blow up after 50 receptions, because like you mentioned, to reiterate on the point, because we made it before the show, AJ Brown himself in one QB probably would have net you the 101 or close based off of Twitter hype. So if you can trade the 101 for AJ Brown, who would have been the 101 value, and you're trading him for J.K. Dobbins, the 104 in one QB.
Oh, yes. That's a no-brainer. Yes.
And then when J.K. Dobbins comes out and gets 55% of the touch share and ends up being a RB15 or something like that, his value is going to skyrocket.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've made a huge profit.
Exactly. So I think this whole situation brings up another point, because we've still got, I think, at least a week, because the NFL and the NFLPA haven't signed like the agreement for the practices they're going to do regarding COVID. So I think the opt-out period is at least until, I believe, like August 6th or August 7th. So between now and the end of next week, we're likely to hear at least maybe one or two more big names within fantasy that are going to opt out for the 2020 season. So I guess the other question is, so say another big name opts out for the season, how should we approach that player within Dynasty? I mean, and regardless of age or position, I mean, what should Dynasty managers be expecting, or at least looking for in terms of a reaction, for their Dynasty squads?
Yeah, we beat it to death before the show, and I think we finally got to a simple answer for this. And if they were going to be fantasy relevant anyways, you don't drop them, especially since you're probably going to have your commissioners doing something like an IR designation that says COVID or says opt-out or something like that. It's free space on your roster. You don't have to worry about that. If they weren't going to be fantasy relevant, that means they were on the part of your roster that's supposed to be churning anyway. So think your Rich James, Kendrick Bourne, guys like that. I've kept Kendrick Bourne for way too long. And those guys are droppable. I mean, because if you have the bottom of your roster churning constantly, you're just looking for that value spike, that that Preston Williams that you got super cheap, something like that. So, yeah, there's no point in keeping them. I mean, those guys aren't long for the NFL in a lot of cases anyways. You're Donovan Peoples-Jones, people like that. Yeah, if they opt out, yeah, you probably drop them because you need to churn the bottom of your roster and try to find somebody that might hit a value spike in 2020. Otherwise, you need to look for somebody else on the waiver wire that might find a value spike. And if they're older, I'm not going to try to guess. If Emmanuel Sanders opts out, if Julian Edelman opts out, I'm not dropping them. I'm not going to try to guess if 35 is the apex for wide receivers and you just can't play after 35. I think if they opt out and they take the season off, they're still probably capable of playing the same football the next year. I'm not going to try to guess. I'll find out the next year. They're not going to net you anything, so there's no point in trying to trade them.
Right.
Certainly not dropping any players that I thought were going to be fantasy relevant this year if they opt out.
No, that wouldn't be my approach either. Like, even with Damien Williams, I'm still going to stash him wherever I have him. Let's say if any of the older players, AJ Green decides to opt out, even though he already signed the franchise tag. I mean, but just like guys that are probably on like the older scale that we only would think that would have a couple of years left anyway, like on the either within the league or on their contracts, still holding on to those guys. Younger dudes, I mean, even if I don't think a rookie has opted out yet, but if any of the, or at least fantasy relevant rookies, but if any of those guys were to opt out, still holding them, especially given especially with their situation, if they are significant fantasy contributors, I still want them on my squad. So at this point, I'm trying to keep as many assets as I possibly can on my team, and then if I wind up having to, sacrifice some bench space, then sure, I can understand that. But my guess is, especially with a lot of leagues around in the Dynasty sphere right now, bracing for how the pandemic is going to affect the NFL, you're probably going to have a decent amount of bench flexibility anyway. So I wouldn't just summarily drop a player because they opted out this season. I would almost guess that for a lot of teams, or for a lot of leagues rather, most folks, you should be scanning the waiver wire anyway and seeing if managers actually do drop some of those guys. So if Damien Williams gets dropped in your league, I would pick him up and stash him.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would see just scan the waiver wire, see who gets dropped. I mean, if it's a player that's opted out and they're coming back to their same situation, same contract situation, same offensive situation in 2021, I would go ahead and pick them up and stash them. I mean, what's the harm at that point in order to wait and see what happens? Because they could wind up, I mean, if we had expected them to be a significant part of their offense this season, at this point, I have no reason to suspect that won't be the same, or at least maybe maybe slightly off from what our expectations are like moving forward. So I would try and hold them if you can.
Yep.
So, all right. So that's where we're at for this week. I mean, a lot of news, and we'll probably have a similar topic next week as more information regarding this season and how it affects the future seasons will be coming out over the next week to 10 days. So if you have other questions, have other thoughts as to how people should be approaching, or how Dynasty managers should be approaching the pandemic, definitely let us know. I would love to get as many thoughts on this as possible, like as we're all trying to figure this out together. So with that, I mean, Adam, do we got anything else before we get on out of here?
Nope. I just can't wait to read the comments that say you're an idiot for trying to sell CEH.
Yeah, that's probably going to happen anyway. All right, but you guys know I'm a Damien Williams truther anyway, so take that into consideration before you come burn our YouTube comments section. So, but we appreciate y'all for checking out the show. Appreciate y'all for coming and listening to us week in and week out. Come find me at Chris Allen FFWX. Go yell at Adam for his bad takes on CEH at APWILDE. Y'all be safe. Go wash your hands. Wear your masks, and we'll catch y'all next week.
Peace.